Hey everybody, welcome back to the Sheepdog Project. Doc with you here. As always, lots going on out there right now. We're just a few days away from Thanksgiving, of course, which we all know ushers in the holiday season and Christmas just around the corner. Hey, ask yourself, have you been a good boy or a good girl this year? Do you deserve something special? I think you do. You're dedicated, you listen to this podcast, you try to be a good sheepdog, you try to keep yourself in good shape, you look out for yourself, you try to protect your family. These are all good things. This means you deserve something special for Christmas this year. You need to be directing whoever's playing Santa in your house to sheepdogresponse.com. Direct them to the Sheepdog store for all of your sheepdog needs, whether we're talking about individual first aid kits, holsters, day packs, anything you might need in the way of fight gear. We've got the Sheepdog Response Jiu-Jitsu gis. We've got gloves, headgear, shin pads, training weapons, everything that you need, all of your sheepdog needs. We've got DVDs, downloadable video content, anything you might need, it's there. Anything that you see us use, if you see us use in the videos, you've seen us use in training, all that stuff is available at the Sheepdog store. And get them while supplies last. We also have the fully stocked tactical stockings, which make a great Christmas gift, great thing to come down to around the fireplace on Christmas morning. Maybe you're not looking for something tangible. Maybe you're one of those people that's fully outfitted. You've got everything you could possibly need. So what do you get for the man or woman who has everything? I'll tell you what you get for the man or woman who has everything. A Sheepdog Response training event. And we have multiple training events right around the corner, many coming up in 2019. What could be better than going to Las Vegas, Nevada, the week before SHOT Show and participating in some of this great Sheepdog Response training? Maybe you're going to go to SHOT Show afterwards. Maybe not. Maybe you're just going to hang out, do some gambling. I like to play craps myself. Whatever your game of choice might be. Maybe you're just going to hang out in the desert. Maybe you're going to jump across the border, go into California and do something. California, of course, going through all those terrible wildfires right now. My heart goes out to everybody there. Our thoughts and prayers are certainly with you. I have family out there, and every day waking up hoping that everybody's okay, hoping they get those under control. But back to Las Vegas. So coming up in Las Vegas, Nevada, the week of January 14th through the 20th, that's the week right before SHOT Show, we have a Sheepdog Level 1 course, which filled up. So we actually added a whole nother Sheepdog Level 1 course. So this is the traditional course that we offer to anybody who is not what we call in the occupational field. So somebody who doesn't need this for their day-to-day duties. You're not a first responder, law enforcement officer, but just somebody who wants to be an all-around better sheepdog. Whether you're somebody who's never taken a martial arts class, never fired a pistol, or somebody who is pretty experienced at both. Maybe you're a jiu-jitsu purple belt or brown belt, and you've been to a couple of pistol courses. You got a good outfit. You got the Broco belt. You got everything else going on, but you want to sharpen your skills, get some tips from some experts in the art of hand-to-hand combat, and some former Special Forces NCOs who know exactly what it's like to go room to room shooting against real, live, pop-up, shoot-back targets. That's the kind of training that you want. You can get all that at the Sheepdog Level 1 course. Also, so we have 2 of those now. So another one just opened up. So if you got shut out of the first one, go back to our website, sign up. There's another course available. We have an Occupational Level 1 for all you first responders. So that's anybody who carries a gun and puts themselves in harm's way as a part of their job. You know, they collect a paycheck for doing what keeps the rest of us safe and standing on that thin line. Also an occupational carbine course. That's for anybody who carries a carbine as part of their regular job. So you're a first responder, you're a SWAT guy, Homeland Security, ICE, whatever it might be. The carbine course is everything that you're going to need to know to properly implement that weapon, as Musashi would say, as your longsword, basically. You're going to get all of that in the Sheepdog Carbine course. It's also going to be a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu seminar that week, and new for 2019, a women's self-defense course, which is very comprehensive with the most high-level female instructors you can possibly imagine. Women who are exceptionally qualified, who are death dealers in their own right, sheepdogs in their own right, and also have some incredibly motivating personal stories about how they came to acquire those skills, and real life stories about how they've utilized them and very empowering. I just can't emphasize enough how great this course is. I'm so glad we've added it for 2019. That's January 14th through the 20th. Coming up in Great Meadows, New Jersey, and that's actually going on right now, November 17th through 19th. That's the Sheepdog Close Quarter Battle Course. So if you didn't sign up for that and you're listening to this, hey man, you probably missed out. February, the week of Valentine's Day, February 14th through the 17th in Ashburn, Virginia. We're going to have a Sheepdog Level 1 course, a Women's Self-Defense course, and a Carbine Level 1 course. Go to sheepdogresponse.com, click on courses, and you'll see where all of these are available. Sign up. These make great Christmas gifts. If you're listening to this, you're wondering what to get your significant other, I just gave you something for everybody right there, regardless of what they do, regardless of their skill level, regardless of their gender, regardless of whether they've been afraid to take something like this previously. I just gave you something for everybody. You have no excuse after listening to this podcast not to have all of your Christmas shopping. Between this and those amazing candy apples that you can get on QVC, you pretty much got all bases covered. So what we're going to talk about today, everybody, lots to talk about. Again, you know, the wildfires in California raging currently. Hopefully those will get under control. Crazy stuff coming on, rockets firing out of the Gaza Strip in Israel. I traveled Israel quite a bit. I hope all of my friends, colleagues, and my fellow sheepdogs over there are safe. I know we've got several listeners in Israel. My heart is with you. Dangerous place to be right now. A lot of these rockets, of course, they're not targeting military targets, they're targeting civilians and neighborhoods. Keep your heads down over there, man. That's the best I can say. And be safe, man. Be vigilant. We just came out of the election cycle. Crazy, crazy stuff. Basically, what we found out is America is kind of equally as divided as we were in the previous election 2 years ago. Everybody's kind of doubling down on that. It appears that the sheriff is not the only incompetent SOB in Broward County, as the entire rest of the nation is done counting ballots, and Broward County still can't seem to get its act together because apparently of one person. If you're one of our listeners in Broward County, and I know we have several, shoot me an email, man. Tell me what everybody's talking about on the ground down there. I'm really curious about that. But I'm not going to get deeply into politics, except that this illustrated points that I made on a previous podcast that, hey, we're deeply divided. People firmly believe what they firmly believe. And it's not a question of what people want. It's a question of, different ideologies on how to get there. And that continues to be true. So I'm really hoping in 2019 can be a rebuilding year for us as a nation, that we start to realize that we can put things like this behind us and dismiss the hate and the rhetoric. And in 2 years, it's going to ramp up again for another election cycle. But I hope between now and then we can build some bridges. And like I told everybody before in that previous podcast, coming up Thanksgiving, Christmas, everything else, don't talk about politics with your family members. Talk about what you have in common. Talk about how much you love one another. Nothing is to be gained. Nothing at all is to be gained by trying to start a fight over the holidays with family members. So please don't do it. So a lot of things I could talk about today, and actually originally I had planned on coming in here and talking about some medical stuff, possibly touching on the opioid crisis, which I think I'm going to do in a future episode. But a lot of emails this week, people taking me up on my offer of checking out martial arts places for them in their immediate area, and I really appreciate that. I don't say that because I don't mean it. I really do mean you can email me at mike@sheepdogresponse.com and ask me any question you want, and whether that's a medical question about my training, how the journey that I took as a ranger, as a special forces demolition sergeant, medic, and ultimately as a physician to what I'm doing today. Or if you want to ask me questions about to vet martial arts places, and I'm certainly not the most qualified person in the world to do that, but I have a little bit of experience. And I've been getting that question a lot in emails, and I don't mind it at all. I find it really rewarding that I can check things like that out for people and help them out, put them on the right track. And most of the time, it ends up being pretty easy that I can very quickly vet the place that they're looking at. But I have run into a couple of late that I looked at, and I saw some red flags that they were, for what the people were looking for, probably not the places they were looking to train. So a little bit about my martial arts background and self-defense background. So first time I was ever exposed to any type of martial art at all was as a kid. Gosh, I guess I was about 8 or 9 years old. I took Tang Sudo. Was the very first thing I ever took. I took it at the Y. Didn't get a chance to really stick with that for very long. I did not come from a family that martial arts lessons were one of those things that were in our disposable income. Then moved to a pretty rural area where I spent my formative years, and it just wasn't available. I don't think. Yeah, I'm from Tehachapi, California, is where I spent my formative years, and I honestly don't recall there being any place that you could take martial arts there at that time. I know I had some classmates that were big into Shotokan, but as I recall, I want to say they had to travel to take those classes. I want to say they traveled to even as far away as Bakersfield to do that. So, and I had other stuff going on that wasn't a priority for me. We didn't have a wrestling team, which is something I regret. I'm a short guy. I'm somebody who probably would have been really geared towards wrestling, and that probably would have been something good for me. And I think wrestling is an extremely valuable skill set, especially when it comes to self-defense. Wrestlers, if you look at wrestlers in the UFC now, they're really dominating. They're doing incredibly well. You look at, DC, you look at Nurmagomedov, all these high-level wrestlers who are doing very well in the UFC and in Bellator because wrestling is just so important, and it's a great way to neutralize other plans. And we're going to talk more about that and more about fights going to the ground as I progress. I wasn't exposed to martial arts again until basic training. Of course, we did the old Army-style hand-to-hand combat, which at that time was largely based on Aikido. It was a lot of Aikido-type moves. You got it very, very, very cursory introduction to that in basic training. I mean, literally, it was like a couple of days, and you didn't do any type of test. You didn't do any sustainment, and you really never saw it. I didn't see it again until Ranger School. And in Ranger School, the only reason they have you do it is just to get you up in the wee hours of darkness and run you around a sawdust pit, and hopefully some people will quit, which is what happened. Actually, that's where I lost my first Ranger buddy in Ranger School, was in the hand-to-hand pit. He quit, which was a good thing for a lot of reasons that I won't get into. But then when I got into Ranger School, I got back to Ranger Battalion. I tried to take up Taekwondo because of op tempo and deployment schedule. I wasn't really able to stay dedicated to that. And also there were a lot of things about Taekwondo that kind of turned me off a little bit initially. A lot of the moves were very similar to Tang Sudo, which I liked because I still had a little bit of those in my memory from a kid. I didn't like, the place that I went specifically was very sport oriented, and we'll explore that a little bit more as we go along. But suffice it to say, me being a young airborne ranger who was there because I wanted to become a more lethal fighting machine, and being told, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you'll get disqualified, you'll lose a point, that's not fair, those weren't necessarily the things I wanted to hear. And this was the 80s, so this was pre-UFC. This was when all of the martial arts tended to become very inbred, right? So martial arts competitions were only against other martial arts that were almost exactly the same under very specific rule sets. So people didn't know what they didn't know during that time. This was before the Great Awakening, as we say, in the early 90s. Then ultimately, years later, of course, after the age of the Great Awakening in the UFC and the exposure of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, in my 40s, of course, I took up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is what I'm passionate about and what I study now, and achieved my purple belt last year, and still continuing to train, and will continue to train until I'm physically no longer able to do so, because I find it incredibly rewarding. But so those are my bona fides. Again, I'm not a black belt. I'm not a grand master. I'm not an expert by any means, but I have been around a little bit, and I interact with a lot of people who know a lot about what they're talking about. If I'm not an expert on something, I seek out people that are. And you know, because of who we've got, if you go to the webpage and you click on instructors, of all the amazing Sheepdog instructors that we have, all the high-level black belts in multiple disciplines, and people that have put it to use in law enforcement, in combat, in the cage, in the ring, and in other situations, in a street fight. I get guidance from a lot of great experts, and I'm not saying anything that I don't think reflects on them as well. If any of them do, they're going to text me about it, certainly. And I know a lot of you are going to have some disagreements with some things that I say today, and that's fine. I'm offering this up as my opinion. Everything I say, I'm not saying it's the gospel. I'm not shutting the door on anything or saying things are definitely this way because they're my opinion. But since I do get asked this question a lot, I thought I would put this out there as a time capsule for anybody. If we're ever in a situation where you can't reach out to me, or maybe you don't want to reach out to me, you want to do your own research, you can listen to this episode of the podcast and the advice that I give and the left and right limits that I set, and hopefully that'll be helpful. Hold on, let me get a drink of coffee here. So jumping right in. So the first question you need to ask yourself is why do you want to take up martial arts? Do you want to do it for self-defense? Are you a young person that has this dream that I want to get in there, I want to fight MMA, either because that's your ultimate goal, or you want to do it just to, I'm making air quotes here, just to see what it's like, and I highly advise against that, because if you are one of those people that says, man, I got in some fights when I was younger and some scraps, and I'm pretty good at fighting, and I'd like to get in there, just walk down that ramp, the music playing, and get in there once just to see what it feels like. And certainly there was a time in my life where I kind of entertained the same thing. After working as a cage-side fight physician, I can tell you that's the worst possible idea. The reason being is, for you, this might be a one and done. I just want to get in there and see what it feels like. That guy across from you, that might be his first fight too, but that might be his first fight on the way to being the next John Jones or the next Stipe or the next Conor McGregor, whatever it might be. So you might be going across basically from a stone cold killer. And that's a person that's in there to sharpen their knife to a razor edge, and you are just another obstacle on the way to that. You can get seriously screwed up in an MMA fight, in spite of the rules, in spite of the gloves, the ref being present, and the constraints and everything else. One good shot can be life-ending, career-ending, could be the difference between you drinking through a straw, you being able to walk under your own power and play catch with your kids, whatever it might be. So if you have this weird dream about doing some, basically your own version of an MMA fantasy camp, I highly advise against it. If you want to train realistically and get in there under very controlled circumstances and try your skills, I highly advise that. But don't think you're going to enter, just because it's an amateur bout, that doesn't mean that person across from you isn't a phenom. You're one and done, but they're in a trajectory going up. And they could do terrible things to you. And that's all I'm going to say about that, but don't do it. But if you are, that is a reason that you could possibly be interested in taking up martial arts, because, you watch MMA, you're young, you're in good shape, this is something you're interested in. You might just want to do it for the discipline aspect of it or the physical fitness aspect of it. This is something, I've tried other things, I don't find them interesting. I've always been interested in martial arts. It's a way that I have to get off the couch 3 times a week and go and for an hour and a half at a time be engaged in some physical activity. Hey, that's a perfectly legitimate reason to want to do it. And you might have zero interest. Your plan might be, I'm just going to call 911 or I'm just going to run away, but I want to do martial arts because I want that aspect of the fitness. It's something engaging that I think I would like a little bit more than running or the treadmill or CrossFit or whatever it might be. And that's fine too. There are some of you out there that might want to study it just for the purpose of tradition, for the love of the history. You're fascinated by the Bushido code, or the whatever it might be, the honor aspect of it, the discipline aspect of it, the harmonious philosophy aspect of it, that's a perfectly legitimate reason to want to study martial arts. There's tons of people that study it that say, for me, it's not about fighting and it's never going to be about fighting, and I've never been in a fight and I don't care. I go 3 times a week and I feel incredibly at peace when I leave. For some people, it's almost like yoga. And if that gets you to that place you want to be mentally and physically, that is a perfect. Don't ever let anybody tell you that that's not a legitimate reason to take martial arts. I can remember running along the East River in New York City on a cold March morning and seeing a group of people doing Tai Chi, and I looked at that and said, "Wow, that looks incredibly calming, restorative." They all look very happy and at peace. And that's a perfectly legitimate reason to take martial arts. It's not just about, are you going to, is iron going to sharpen iron? Are you going to test yourself? For a lot of people it is. And for me it is in a big way. But that's not the only reason to take up martial arts. If you're listening to this podcast and you are a partner in the Sheepdog philosophy, and I think most of you are, then the likely reason for you to want to take up a martial art is for self-defense. And if you've been a listener for a while and you haven't done that already, there's been something that's been holding you back, okay? Something, either you don't feel like you're in shape enough, or you haven't found the right place, or you haven't made time for it. You need to eliminate all those excuses, first of all. Because if you do want to do it, if your reason for doing it is self-defense, unlike the other reasons, if you wanted to do it for discipline, hey, you can find discipline in a self-help book. If you want to do it for physical fitness, you can find physical fitness in a home gym or just doing burpees at home or whatever it might be. If for tradition and love of history, you can watch History Channel, or you can buy a DVD set. You can become a Civil War reenactor. Okay, those are all reasons that you can embrace history. You can collect Japanese swords, and I know somebody that does. That's a way you can embrace that history without going and sweating for an hour and a half 3 times a week. But if you're into the self-defense aspect of it, then you got to just go do it. And you got to eliminate all those excuses that are in your mind, okay? That I got to wait till I'm over this injury, or I got to wait till I'm in better shape. We don't ever tell kids you need to get smarter before you can show up to your first day of school. So, I showed up to my first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class in pretty lousy shape, and it's going to get you in shape as you go. And we've talked about this on the program before. You do need to supplement that, in my opinion, with other forms of fitness, both cardio and strength, in order to cultivate overall fitness, overall durability. But don't kick the can down the road. If you need to do this for self-defense, you could literally take a class tonight that you could use tomorrow. You might go to a class tonight, learn how to escape the mount, and get knocked on your butt in a parking lot tomorrow, and somebody jump on top of you and you successfully escape the mount. Has it ever happened? I don't know, but it's possible. So if you're thinking of doing it for self-defense, stop kicking the can down the road, and you need to do it. And that specifically is what we're going to kind of gear this talk about, is somebody who wants to take up the practice of martial arts specifically to defend themselves, to be a better sheepdog. First and foremost, first thing that you need to do when you're gonna pick someplace, you got to decide on what art you're gonna take, right? What's gonna suit you, and it is no secret that I'm biased to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and pretty much everybody in the Sheepdog crew is, and the majority of people that we've had on the podcast have been. And we're not saying that's the only game that's out there. There's other ways to skin that cat. There's other ways to get there, even though we have a tremendous bias towards BJJ because of a lot of factors. You need to pick some place that teaches both stand-up fighting and ground fighting, okay? And true Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu does that, okay? True Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, If you look at Hoist Gracie in the original UFCs, you see him throwing kicks, throwing strikes. You see him taking up a stance that doesn't necessarily look like a traditional sport jiu-jitsu stance. And I've had the privilege of having a class from Hoist, and that's one of the first things that he likes to go over at the basic level is some basic kicking stuff, and what they call in Muay Thai the teep, kind of keeping somebody away, and using that as a setup for takedowns, a setup so that you control the distance, things of that nature. So in traditional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you'll see that it's not just about always starting on your knees and being on the ground and only ground fighting. It is about stand-up as well, and there are strikes involved. Obviously, you don't practice those every day in class, although if you go to some place that is not emphasizing the sport, they should be doing that at least on some level, whether it's light palm strikes, to get your mind on the fact that you're concentrating on that foot lock or whatever at the expense of leaving your face open, or donning light gloves from time to time so you can beat on each other a little bit to get out of those bad habits that you tend to get into in sport jiu-jitsu, where it's like, well, I'm not getting hit, so I can put my face in a vulnerable position. I can lock up both of my hands trying to do this particular move and thereby put myself at risk. You want to veer away from that. But regardless of what you're going to take, it needs to emphasize both. And the big argument that people always put forward against jiu-jitsu as a form of self-defense, and this tends to be what I hear each and every time is, well, if you go to ground and it's multiple opponents, you're going to die. Okay, I will agree with that. Obviously you're not going to pull guard against multiple opponents. That's a really bad idea. You're on your back with one guy on top of you who you might control, but you're also on your back. If you're in top side control and there's multiple opponents and you're keeping an eye on them, as long as you don't have any behind you, you can always get up and disengage, right? You got one person down on their back and you can disengage. So that's not terrible. The last person that put this argument forth to me, I'm not going to get into who they were and what particular style they were advocating, but their argument, of course, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you go into the ground, that's worthless against multiple opponents. Well, the style that they were advocating was worthless against one opponent. It was a style that's completely antiquated, very rigid, leaves you open to multiple things to get yourself in a bad situation. And what do I equate this to is if you're going to learn to drive, you're not going to learn how to drag race, right? You're not going to learn how to drive very, very fast, very, very straight for a very, very short period of time. You need to learn how to negotiate obstacles, to change lanes, to be cognizant of what's behind you, what's to your left and right, traveling at varying speeds, doing controlled stops, doing controlled starts, all of those things. When we teach kids how, at the age of 15, 16, how to drive, we don't start them out teaching them how to drag race, because that's very one-dimensional. You need to be multi-dimensional, okay? You need to be doing stand-up and doing stuff on the ground. And the statistic that goes back and forth, 80 to 90% of fights end up on the ground. And the counter to that is always, but 100% of fights start on the feet. I'm not even going to talk about the numbers. I don't care about the numbers. You need to know both, okay? You need to know how to fight standing up. You need to know how to fight with strikes. You need to know how to react to strikes, react to kicks, and you need to know what to do on your ground. Because if you are only one-dimensional, if you can only do one or the other, then you are susceptible to the opposite side of that coin. If you can only fight on the ground, then somebody is going to control the distance and they're going to pick you apart with strikes. If you can only strike, somebody's going to bum rush you and they're going to tackle you and they're going to take you to the ground. So you need to know how to do both, and you need to be comfortable with both. So how do you do that? Again, if you do true Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and yes, there are some limits to that. Is the stand-up in true Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as good as Muay Thai or some of the other things that are out there? No, it's not, and I'm not going to say it is. But in my opinion, it does make you pretty well-rounded. And does it emphasize the ground? Absolutely. But I think you come out of that pretty well-rounded. I don't think it's the 100% solution, though. I think you do need to supplement it. There are now and people in the new generation have the advantage of true mixed martial arts gyms being out there. And a lot of these guys who've come up and been very successful, Conor McGregor did a little bit of boxing at a very young age and then jumped right into a complete mixed martial arts program. Sage Northcutt, same thing, mixed martial arts program. Ortega, mixed martial arts program from the very beginning. And these are guys who are really good, very well-rounded, right? There's not a lot of holes in their game. A fair number of the guys at Uriah's gym, same thing, because they're younger guys. And of course, I mentioned Sage. They came up as true mixed martial artists. You have to be careful though, because there are gyms out there that are calling themselves MMA gyms that are doing that to kind of glom on to that phrase to get business. That if you dig far enough, they're not really an MMA gym. They are a whatever style gym that has rebranded themselves as an MMA gym. And they might not have the expertise to back that up. So a true MMA gym should have high-level striking coaches, high-level grappling coaches, right? So showing you how to do any type of submission and ground fighting, and higher-level wrestling, okay? Because if you look at how wrestlers do against traditional jiu-jitsueros and judokas, a lot of those traditional judo throws, the wrestlers shooting for double legs, shooting for single legs, doing ankle picks and knee picks, it makes for a lot of trouble for them, which is why the wrestling moves have basically been outlawed in a lot of these major judo tournaments because they're so effective. And so you need to be very well-rounded. Striking, kicking, tying up with somebody standing up, knowing how to do a judo throw, knowing how to do a wrestling takedown, knowing how to negate both of those things, and knowing what to do on the ground. And again, I know I'm beating this drum, but it's for a reason. It's because it really is true. You need to be well-rounded. And I'm going to talk more about it later, because anybody who tells you that you don't is wrong. And they've practiced in a vacuum, and they've never put themselves in a test. So MMA gyms are certainly out there, but do a little bit of research on them and make sure that, number one, you're not getting associated with a place that's not truly an MMA gym. They're just calling themselves that. And also, you don't want to get thrown into a place that is an MMA training location, okay, that's a meat grinder for up-and-coming fighters that might be a little bit hard for you to keep up with, okay? There's some great gyms out there that act as training centers for fighters and also provide great civilian instruction, but you don't want to get thrown in there as a sparring dummy, as basically a heavy bag with a pulse for some up-and-coming fighters and just end up getting hurt. That's not what you want. There's a few other options that are out there. So traditional karate, traditional martial arts, traditional karate, kung fu, absolutely have a place in martial arts. We boo-hooed those for a while in MMA because we weren't really seeing it. But we've noticed as the level of the game has come up that having those tools in your toolbox is very beneficial, especially when all other things become equal. Some of these, the more traditional martial arts moves come into play. Wonder Boy shows this a lot. Anthony Pettis certainly shows that. Conor McGregor has demonstrated some of these moves, and a lot of the other real high-level guys have as well. So all of that has a place. There's a lot of things out there that work. There's no, with a few exceptions, there's very few things out there that you can go, that the entire martial art is just crap. The way that it is tested might be complete crap, but there's very few things out there that you can point to. But there are some, but very few that you can point to and you go, the whole thing is just absolute crap. It's just completely worthless. Krav Maga, something that gained a lot of popularity, and I have seen some Krav Maga practitioners who are absolutely amazing that I have no doubt can back up everything that their training says that they can do. And there's some great schools out there. In the Austin area, of course, we have Lions Krav Maga that's run by the Friars. They do great stuff there. They believe in evolving it as it goes and reacting to what works and what doesn't. They're very welcoming to students. It's a great place to study. I know the students that go there just absolutely love it. But like any place, there's some good ones and there's some bad ones. And I had a bad experience with a Taekwondo place in my younger days. There are probably some great ones out there that were teaching it properly, teaching you how to do it with power, teaching you how to do it so you could use it in a real fashion. That just wasn't what I was exposed to. I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't know. I haven't cracked the code on how to differentiate the real hardcore good Krav places from the McDojo Krav places. And there's both out there. I know there's one near me that's considered a little bit more of a McDojo Krav place. And what I would say to that is kind of along the same lines of what I said about MMA gyms, is when you see a place that started out as a whatever karate place or a whatever family martial arts place, and I'm going to talk more about that term later, and then they threw some Krav classes in there. Okay, that's somebody who probably was a high-level belt in something else and then went and took some Krav, and now they're bringing that back into their gym for the marketing aspect of it. Because as it's become a little bit more popularized, there's money in doing that. And remember, a lot of people running these schools, I mean, let's be honest, they're businesses. So they have to put people in that class. And if nobody was interested in taking whatever it was, Shaolin, Wing Chun, Shotokan, Shuri-Ryu, whatever it was, but when Krav became the flavor of the week, they saw a buck to be made. Hey, they might have gone to some month-long training camp and come back with some type of instructor certification from somebody to open up their own school as an affiliate, by demonstrating a minimal amount of knowledge in that. And that goes on in all martial arts. I mean, you see people own jiu-jitsu academies that are not black belts. Now they have, according to the way it's supposed to work, they're supposed to be under the auspices of a black belt somewhere, ideally. So this goes on in all martial arts. So if you do want to take Krav Maga, I wish I had more expertise in what I could tell you about how to differentiate between what's a good one and what's a bad one, other than what I already listed. If you're somebody out there that is a Krav practitioner and you know the secret to that, email it to me, because I'd be interested to know it and to share it with everybody else. Something that you want to avoid when you're looking into what type of art that you want to take or where you want to go, you want to avoid these what I call belt mills, or some people call them McDojos. So the places, the little strip mall places, and a lot of them are in strip malls, so that doesn't necessarily mean they're bad. But any place that guarantees promotion, guarantees we're going to make you a black belt in 3 years, or we will get you to this level this fast, because you can't. There's no possible way you can do that. Everybody learns at a different rate. Everybody's going to be able to go a different number of times per week. Everybody has different skill levels, different muscle memories based on their physical makeup, and just how well they learn things, what kind of learner they are. So there's no way they can guarantee that. And if they are, that means that they're just going to stamp you as you go. And what they're doing is they're being a drug dealer. So they're meting out the crack to you on a timed system, so they know they keep you coming back. Like right about the point that you'd be thinking about, I don't know if I want to renew my membership or not. Oh, well, here's another promotion for you. So be careful of places like that, and there are places like that out there. A big red flag for me when I'm looking at these places that tells me it's a place to avoid is if you're looking at their website and you can't tell what it is they teach. So my son got involved with a place like this when he was in middle school. That my oldest, that he let me know, hey Dad, I've started taking martial arts, and of course he lives in San Antonio. Told me the name of the place. I looked it up. I spent 20 minutes on their website and I couldn't figure out what it was. I couldn't find any reference to it's this style of karate. It's under, the person teaching, got their certification under this person and this is what they practice. There was a great bio on the instructor that listed a lot of different martial arts that instructor had done, but it didn't say what his core philosophy was, what the art was that they were teaching. And I couldn't figure it out. It didn't say it anywhere on the website. And most places are going to tell you, most reputable places should be proud of what they're teaching. If you're confident that the art that you're teaching works, that should be all the name that you need to have out there, right? So, I mean, jiu-jitsu places, if you see a place that says Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, they know that right away in and of itself has prestige. So they're putting that out there. If it's a martial art that either nobody's ever heard of or nobody thinks very highly of, that's when you see these places that are called, something something martial arts academy, something something family martial arts, and you can just they'll have names like Prestige Martial Arts Academy. Okay, what kind of martial art? And you can't figure it out. And if Prestige is a real martial arts academy, I don't know if it is or not. I'm not specifically referencing them. I'm using that as an example. You should be able to see what they're teaching. So that you can research, you can go to the Wikipedia page, you can go somewhere else and say, okay, this is the foundation of this. It came from this region of Japan or this region of China or Okinawa, and it was based on this. And, these are some notable practitioners. If you look up Aikido or Hapkido or Taekwondo or anything like that, you can find all that information. But if something has a generic name, you're not going to be able to find that. And that tells me they have a little bit of something to hide, or they're trying to play both sides of the fence just to get people in there. That ends up being almost more like an exercise class or a dance class. It's a way to get kids corralled for an hour and get them focusing on an activity, right? It tends to be a little bit less about martial arts. And that's fine if you want to have your kids go and do something about that. So they're getting up off the couch, not playing video games. But if you're doing this for self-defense, you kind of want to know where it came from, right? You kind of want to know, are there any notable people that have put this to the test, right? Any place, I hate to say this, but I hate any place that has family in the title, because to me that tends to be a little bit more of a marketing ploy. That's great, if you want to go do that. And I'm not saying that you should go someplace that doesn't offer kids classes, because all jiu-jitsu academies offer kids classes, and they should. Places that have family in the title, I don't know. I just haven't had good experience with them. That's been mine. Maybe somebody out there has a different experience, but show me a top 15 fighter in the UFC that strictly trains at a place that's called something family martial arts, because I don't know of them. Okay. And I think a lot of those use that as a generic term without using what type of art that they're teaching. Again, they should all have kids classes, because I think that's important. And I do think if you're going to do this, you should enroll your kids as well. I don't like places that have all ages classes. So if you're in there as an adult and in your class down the line from you is a 7-year-old, I think that's a problem. Because that tells me that's a place that's not going to do any sparring, number one. Number two, you're not going to be teaching the down and dirty techniques that work and bringing real-world realism, talking about eye gouging, groin strikes, and biting somebody else's lip off with 7-year-olds in the room. You're probably just not going to be doing that. So if you want to do it as a family bonding experience, fine. If you want to go in there and be in the same class as your 7-year-old, hey, that's great. You're doing it as a family bonding experience, but don't think you're in there learning real-world techniques that are possibly going to save your life, because that's not what you're doing, okay? And I'm not knocking it if you want to do it as a family bonding experience, as a way to embrace the philosophy and the culture of martial arts. More power to you. I'm happy for you, but just know what you're getting out of it. I already talked about any place that guarantees promotions. Yes, I am going by some notes today, by the way. Here's something I've seen recently. So places that started out as one thing and then added something else. Recently, I was asked to vet a school in an email, and guy sent me a link to the email, and I clicked on it, and it said big letters, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then it had this big thing, what is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, blah, 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 blah. And I'm looking at the page that I'm on, and I'm like, this is not the landing page for the school. This is one of the sub pages. That was the link that he sent me. So I clicked over to home. This was not a jiu-jitsu academy. This was a martial arts academy for some other style that escapes me at the moment, that had been in business for quite some time. It had how long they'd been in business on there. It was greater than 20 years. I clicked on the instructors. So I said, okay, let's see what's going on here. The first thing I see is an overweight black belt. So, and if your belly hangs out over your black belt, that's a bad indication in and of itself. I scroll down. There's another black belt, and neither one of these had any mention of jiu-jitsu in their credentials. Multiple other martial arts, I didn't see any jiu-jitsu. I scroll down a little bit more. We get to the third black belt, female. Same thing, similar lineage to the other two. No mention of jiu-jitsu. I go down farther. I ended up scrolling through like 7 or 8 black belts, which, wow, that's a lot of black belts for one academy, right? 7 or 8 black belts, no mention of jiu-jitsu. And then at the very bottom, there's no pictures, but there's a description of who their jiu-jitsu instructors are. I look those people up. They're actually affiliated with another gym that's about an hour away. So what that tells me is this was a traditional martial arts place for this particular style that saw that there was a marketable need for jiu-jitsu out there. So they added some jiu-jitsu classes. Well, that's fine. That is absolutely fine. If you can go in there and negotiate a separate contract and say, I only want to go to the jiu-jitsu classes, and you're offering enough of them a week, right? This isn't somebody that shows up once a week. This is somebody that's, given me at least 3, at least 2, preferably 3. You'd like to go even more than that. But this is an add-on, okay? That's not necessarily a bad thing. If this is a really remote area where that's, the fact that you've got a jiu-jitsu practitioner coming in 2 to 3 times a week to teach a class, or even if it's a black belt coming in once a week and a purple belt's running the class the other couple of days, but that black belt's still coming around to, to kind of maintain that quality control, or even a brown belt coming around to maintain that quality control, that's great. If that's the best you've got. But when I looked in that same area and I found 3 jiu-jitsu academies, legit jiu-jitsu academies, in the same area, that wouldn't necessarily be my first choice. And nothing that I saw about what they were teaching in that other particular martial art was anything that was telling me that it was legitimate for self-defense. Okay, and I'll talk more about that as we go along. So any place that starts out as one thing and then decides to add this other stuff in, or just rebrand themselves as an MMA gym, like I said, those are places that I wouldn't go. Any place that has and making air quotes here, fighting system that some 30-year-old guy invented, right? So he's 30 years old. He's been doing martial arts for about 15, maybe 20 years. But somehow this guy figured out, or girl, figured out in the last 15 to 20 years what everybody else has had wrong for thousands of years, right? Everything that Greco-Roman wrestling has had wrong, everything that all the Asian martial arts had wrong, everything that judo, jiu-jitsu, everything else has had wrong. They somehow cracked the code. Since the first time men clustered together in small bands, people have been laying hands on one another and fighting over stuff, whether it was food, whether it was a mate, whatever that might be. Fighting, unarmed combat has been going on since man has been going on. So there's no reason to believe that somebody just all of a sudden cracked the code and figured out what everybody else couldn't figure out in 15 to 20 years. Yes, every few generations people come on who are innovators, but they're not complete redesigners, okay? The great Elio Gracie, amazing innovator, right? Not a complete redesign, but a great innovation on existing arts. Bruce Lee, the art of Jeet Kune Do, great innovation on some already existing techniques, okay? Innovation is a great thing, but coming along and saying, hey, I just figured out this, and most of these things, every once in a while they're good, but that's a rarity, okay? Somebody who's in my opinion is a phenom, somebody like Matt Larson, who already a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and I believe in Sambo as well, combining what he knew there, what he knew from wrestling, what he knew from stand-up, and starting something amazing like the Modern Army Combatives program. That's innovation. That's not a complete redesign. He didn't try to say, hey, I figured out what everybody else has wrong. I just figured out a way how to implement what's already out there and put it in a great training program for people, and that's what he did. That's one thing. Somebody coming up with most of the time these are bro science things, right? Like I figured out, there are these key points that nobody else has figured, that these key points of balance or points of pain, or your brain processes information this way, so you always have to you have to practice it like this because your first instinct is always going to be do this. So we're just going to go with that. This is all crap. All right, there's no foundation of science in there, and I've read some of the I'm making air quotes again, science behind what some of these systems are, and it's just absolute crap. So I don't, anybody who thinks they cracked the code in their short lifetime, I would be very wary of, especially if it's totally off the rails from what anybody else was doing. If it's combinations of things that were already working, if it's integration and innovation, those are great things, and there's people out there doing that. But these people who design their own fighting systems, there's a lot of problem with those, and I'm going to expound a little bit on that a little bit later. This is going to be a much longer episode than I thought, but that's okay. You guys don't mind. So once you kind of, with the information that I've already given you, now hopefully you're on a track for kind of what you want to do. You know why you're doing it, and you know kind of where you want to focus, whether that's going to a place that offers you a combination of Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai, or traditional full-on MMA gym. You're just going to stick, you found a great Jiu-Jitsu place, that's what you want to go to. But now if you don't even have a starting point, you need to basically Google your area and figure out what's out there. And you're going to do that by keywords, whether that's, whatever, you live in, big city USA, whether that's big city USA, mixed martial arts, or big city USA, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, big city USA, boxing, Muay Thai, whatever it might be. You're going to start with a simple Google search, but keep in mind, these search engines can be manipulated, and martial arts places will do that. A martial arts place that might not offer judo, wrestling, or any of these other stuff will pay in the search engine that those are keywords that will also trigger a search for them. So they might show up in the number 1 or 2 spot, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what they're offering. Okay, and a great example is that place that I mentioned that was not a jiu-jitsu academy that came up number 1 if you search jiu-jitsu for that particular area, and that was why. So keep that in mind. That doesn't mean that, boom, I found a place, all right, I'm driving over there tomorrow and I'm taking class. You need to do a little bit more research. So you're going to look in the area based on the style that you're looking for. As you go to these individual websites, they should say who their instructors are. They should say who and what belt level they are. It should not be nebulous. It shouldn't take you that 20 minutes to figure out what style they are and what their rank is. And also, they should list their lineage. They should say who they got their certification, who they got their black belt from, okay? Jiu-Jitsu academies are really hold people's feet to the fire when it comes to this. You have to list your lineage. Your lineage, if you're a black belt, is very important. And when in IBJJF tournaments, black belts have to go in there showing that they're a black belt and listing who their lineage is, who they got their black belt from, who that person got that black belt from, etc. So these are all things they should be proud of. And because they should be proud of them, it's just like if you go to a course that's taught by military personnel, it should not be vague. It shouldn't, and I've talked about this before and I will talk about it again in the future, really vague terms like has worked with numerous special operations units means absolutely nothing. That means nothing, okay? Would you take martial arts from somebody who said has worked with multiple martial arts experts? No. You want to know what their rank is and who they got it from by name, because those are things they should be proud of. Those are advertising points. They should offer you some type of free trial, okay? Whether that's just 1 or 2 classes or a whole month, a week, whatever it might be. You shouldn't have to commit right off the street, and you shouldn't feel pressured. When you go in there, if and when you go in there, you should not feel pressured to sign something right now and walk out of there with an armload of gear and a gi and t-shirts and sweatpants and shorts and all this other stuff. You shouldn't have to show up your first day and be out $200 before you even get to try it. You should at least get to try it with minimal stuff on your own. You know, a cup and a mouthpiece, and they should be able to loan you everything else. I've never been to a jiu-jitsu gym that didn't have a shelf full of gis if somebody shows up for a drop-in for a loaner gi. I've never been to a boxing or Muay Thai place that didn't have plenty of gloves, headgear for people to use, okay? Those aren't personal and intimate things. Those can be loaners. Yeah, if you're going to be a regular student there, you need to buy it. But just to get in there and try it out, you shouldn't have to outlay a lot of cash. That is a huge red flag. That's somebody that wants your money. When you're looking at that website, too, before you even ever go there, you should see a class schedule posted. That was another thing that bothered me about the place that I mentioned. They didn't say when their jiu-jitsu classes were. I had no idea from looking at their website how many they offered a week. Class schedules should be posted online. The reason places don't is they want you to call first. They want you to call because they want to know when you're coming in, because they want to meet you and put their best foot forward. Now, on one hand, that's a good thing. You know, the idea that somebody's going to meet you and they're going to give you a tour and everything else. But it also raises the hairs on my back of my neck. Like, do they not want me just popping in and showing up unannounced? Is there something they don't want me to see? Do they not want me to catch them with their guard down? Do they only want to put their best foot forward? And I think they should be open to that. And I've never been to a jiu-jitsu place that didn't post the schedule online, that for the first time you can just show up during a class and check it out. So if class schedules aren't posted online so that you can just go over there and check it out, that's a red flag. Look at those online reviews, but not just how many stars they are. Oh, they're 5 stars. They have 28 reviews and they're 5 stars. You need to read the reviews, read the comments. Okay, if they all sound exactly the same, that's a red flag. That's somebody who was told what to say. Those might even be paid reviewers. If all the positive reviews were written within a few days of each other, that's a red flag. That's the day they went live on Yelp or whatever it is, they went to everybody that was signed up and said, everybody who goes and writes us a review, we're going to give you a t-shirt. And they all ran and wrote reviews. Or they had all their family members do it. Or their employees do it. Also, if you look and the newest review is 3 years old, same type thing. When they went live, a bunch of people did reviews. Now they've completely lost interest. Nobody else has cared enough about them to write reviews. I'm a person that if I like a place, I'm actually I'm the exception to the rule. I'm more likely to write a good review on a place when they make an impression than I am to write a bad review. If somebody turns me off whatever type of business it is, I just typically don't give them my business again. Most people are the opposite. Most people are more likely to write a bad review than they are to write a good review, which seems counterintuitive. So read the reviews. Read the negative reviews too, and decide if they're legitimate criticism or not. Some of them might just be whining. Some of them, there's a fine line between, they tried to rip me off and I just didn't understand what a contract was, okay? One particular one, and this was on a local martial arts place here where I live, somebody wrote a bad review and they said it's completely unfair to, how do they word it, to bind a 7-year-old to a contract. Well, they're not binding a 7-year-old to a contract. They can't do that. A 7-year-old can't sign a contract. They're binding you, the parent, to the contract. And then for whatever reason, you didn't want to take your kid to class because they said, I don't want to go. They lost interest in it, whatever it was. That's on you, okay? they don't know when they sign you up for that contract what kind of a parent you are. Remember that in the end, this is a business. And the reason that these places have contracts is you have, it's kind of a good faith outlay at the beginning. Again, they shouldn't have asked money from you from that first day you walked in the door. But at some point, you are going to have a fiduciary relationship there. And there needs to be some type of outlay on your part to make good on that. Typically, what a lot of places do is for the first 6 months or maybe even a year, you pay up. You don't pay all that up front, but you have a contract for that first 6 months to a year. And then after that, you can quit at any time. It's month to month. You don't renew the contract. And I think that's the best way to do it, because typically if you stayed around a year and you're still going, you're probably going to stay around anyway. Do a little bit of research on the owner/instructor of that gym, okay? Google that person's name, see what comes up. Are there YouTube videos of that person giving instructional videos, YouTube videos of them competing? These are all great things. Google them again and put the word fraud after their name. So like if you were going to Google me, in fact, you can go ahead and do this. Google Mike Simpson, MD, fraud, and see what comes up. I have no idea because I've never Googled myself like that. If you do that, this might take you to a message board, a martial arts website, something like that, that exposes this person that you might not have found otherwise. I can tell you there are a couple of Facebook groups that track kind of bogus martial arts academies, bogus martial arts masters. And in one of them in particular, they have busted out a lot of guys who were convicted of child molestation, who have no business being around children and are out there running martial arts academies. So I'm not trying to scare you by saying that, but do some research on especially if your kids are going to go there, on the people that are going to be interacting with your kids, okay? Definitely nobody who you find has a criminal record as a sexual predator of any kind, whether that's adults or kids or anything like that, or a violent criminal. None of those people should be teaching martial arts. You know, I'm not saying martial arts has turned some people's lives around, and I personally know a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt who is a pillar of his community and a great guy who in his younger days did what he would say was some pretty dumb things and ended up with a criminal record because of it. And he's an outstanding guy, and I would let him teach any one of my family members, and again, pillar of the community. But if somebody is a deviant, if somebody's a child molester, if somebody's a sexual predator, that's not somebody you want to be in there doing. Somebody's at my front door at home speaking. That's not somebody you want teaching you or your kids. So take that for what it's worth. Where was I here? Sorry, guys, I'm getting distracted by. If you don't have Ring, especially this time of year, you absolutely need to have it because anytime you're getting packages dropped off or something like that. Of course, we have this is also the time of year that those notorious package thieves are all driving around, and you want to watch out for those. I don't want to get off track though. So the next step is you're going to go check the place out. So what I recommend people do, again, is drop in while a class is in progress. If you can stagger it so you catch the end of one class and the beginning of another class, I think that's even better because that gives you kind of the whole spectrum. When you first go in there, take a look at the area. Is this going to be an area that you're comfortable traveling to, comfortable parking your car and leaving it there? If there's a methadone clinic right next to this place, that might not be the best place for you to be hanging out. And this is not necessarily an indication of the level of instruction that's going on, but it could be an indication of the level of that owner and proprietor's responsibility that he or she feels to his students to be set up in a safe environment. Hey, I know space is at a premium in a lot of places, and I've been to an outstanding mixed martial arts facility in the city of Houston that Tim and I witnessed. Actually, we were teaching a course there, witnessed drug deals going on through the window. And this was a great place. But be aware of your environment. Something obviously we preach on this podcast all the time. Just be aware of what's around it. When you go inside, it shouldn't be sparkling clean. I mean, this is a place where people sweat. This is a place where some level of bleeding occurs, right? It's not going to be pristine. It's not a hospital waiting room. It shouldn't be filthy either. If you immediately walk in and it smells like mildew, that's bad. Okay, that's a place that's not cleaning their mats. That's a place that's a setup for ringworm. That's a setup for staph infections. That's a setup for badness. That shows that they don't care about their students, that they're not taking pride in what they do. So it should be clean, but again, it doesn't have to be pristine. You know, you're not going to go in there and eat a meal off the mats. I like a place with mats, period. You know, the place that I briefly took Taekwondo in my younger days was wooden floors. And I know some martial arts academy traditionally are set up that way, but what does that tell you? That tells you right away that they're one-dimensional, right? That's a drag strip. They're only teaching you drag racing. They're not teaching you ground fighting, and that's a problem. If they have multiple services, if they have a wooden floor over here for this type of stand-up, if they have a judo floor over there, maybe a boxing ring, that's something different altogether. But take note of all those things. When you go in and watch the class, the instructor should do what the students do. Okay, they should be demonstrating, they should be participating with the students, and they should be in reasonable shape to do so. Okay, this martial arts to be taught properly needs to be taught by someone who's doing it, and I don't care what it is you're talking about. If they're completely physically incapable of doing so, that's a problem. Now, if you think of Mickey and Rocky, right? Obviously, Mickey could never spar with Rocky. Right? But Mickey wasn't training brand new boxers either. So Mickey was a trainer for people who already knew that if he called out a combo, that if he directed him to do something, they already knew how to do it. All he had to do was critique him. That's an entirely different level of instruction. When you're talking about somebody who's teaching martial arts from the ground up, they should be physically capable of doing it. If you go in and the instructor looks like somebody you would typically associate with being on the couch playing video games, not somebody you would associate with being on the mat doing martial arts, that's a red flag. Remember, this is, unless it's a stand-in instructor, this is somebody that this is their livelihood. So they should be in there like 5 days a week working out. I'm not saying that they should be in fitness magazine level shape, but they should be in reasonable shape if that's what their job is. Now, if they're just showing up 5 days a week and they're walking around, talking to people, telling them what to do, they're not participating, so they're not demonstrating. They might be talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk, is what I'm saying. And I don't think that's a person you want to learn from. There could be factors there. They might have been somebody who just came out of a shoulder surgery, hip surgery, something like that. Take that into account. But, you know, in a lot of cases, that's not what we're seeing. You know, we're seeing people that have gotten used to podium instructing and not demonstrating. They're not getting in the trenches with the troops anymore. Observe the dynamic between teacher and student. It should be appropriate. It shouldn't be Cobra Kai level of animosity, right? It's not a drill instructor, but it also shouldn't be completely informal either, right? It should be respectful. If you go in there and you notice the instructor's trying to talk and students are over talking on their own and laughing and not paying attention, that tells you it's a completely undisciplined class. It's not going to be a good learning environment for you. If they're barking instructions and penalizing students, you're probably not, you know, you're paying to be there. That's probably not going to be a conducive environment for you to learn either. Just see what kind of vibe you get from the instructor, from the employees. Do you feel pressured? Did they completely ignore you when you went in there? And most places will send somebody over to greet you. Typically, an instructor or assistant instructor will break off, come over and greet you. Some places are so busy that they don't. They just don't have time, and they figure that the class is going to speak for itself. Okay, so don't get upset if you get completely ignored. You know, if you're trying to talk to somebody and they blow you off, that's a horse of a different color. But again, you shouldn't feel pressured either. You know, you shouldn't. All right, so this is what we do. So you ready? You ready? You ready to take the jump? You ready to do it? You know, it shouldn't be like that either. Are they sparring against fully resistant opponents? That's something I can't emphasize enough. You should see sparring. when you go to a martial arts class. All right. And and I've always said that's the huge advantage in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is sparring against fully resistant opponents, because that's when you really figure out if what you're doing works. It's not hitting a bag. It's not hitting mitts. It's not doing forms in empty space. It's going against a fully resistant opponent. And that's where the rubber meets the road. So you should observe that in the class. You should observe some type of sparring, or at least drilling. If it's a basic class, you might go a lot of places that are basic jiu-jitsu, you'll see drilling going on. Introductory Muay Thai classes are the same thing. You'll see a lot of drilling. One person might be holding mitts. You'll see some shadowing of footwork back and forth, things like that. You're not necessarily going to see full-on sparring in a beginner Muay Thai class. Ask students you see coming and going how long they've been going there and how they like it, and what they like about it. Here's some things to avoid, in my opinion, when you're picking someplace. And I talked about some of these already. To me, if you're going to do this for self-defense, I think you should avoid places that emphasize the fact that they teach all the traditional martial arts weapons. And I know I'm going to get some hate emails for this, but here's my opinion on that. Are you carrying a bow staff? Are you carrying fighting sticks? Are you carrying nunchucks? Are you carrying a sword in the trunk of your car? Then why do you need to learn to use them? Okay. I'm not saying there isn't a place for things like that, but if you're learning this for self-defense, first of all, to master a weapon is going to take a lot of time, okay? Like a lifetime to master something like that. So why are you going to parcel off time from learning the other things to learn that? That could be spent learning another aspect that maybe you're not emphasizing in class, whether it's the stand-up aspect, the ground aspect, whatever it might be. Adding weapons into it, you start to get into this jack of all trades, master of none. It ends up being all flash and no substance. It's really cool. Hey, we got to do this. I run into the same thing when I teach medical courses. It's like, hey, we want to do live tissue. Hey, we want to do cadaver training. Okay, you need to learn how to put a tourniquet on that guy's arm first, and then we can advance to that. That's flashy. That's cool. Everybody remembers that and everybody talks about it later. That doesn't mean it necessarily lent anything to you. When was the last time you saw somebody use nunchucks in a street fight? When was the last time you saw somebody pull out a sai in a street fight and utilize it to defend their family? I know people are really sold on the Filipino, whatever I wanted to call it, eskrima, but I know it's not, kali, right? People are really sold on that. Hey, if that's what you like to do, that's what you like to do. To me, I don't see the utility in it. I don't carry sticks everywhere I go. So if I don't carry sticks everywhere, if I know that I lead a life where I'm never going to have sticks in my hand, why would I even want to spend 10% of my time? Even, for those of you who are getting ready to email me and say, well, in Cali, you only use the sticks 50% of the time and you're also doing other stuff. I'm never going to have them in my hand. So why do I even want to do it 10% of the time? Okay. I don't take a revolver to the range because I don't shoot a revolver. So why would I want to practice with it? Okay. I don't take a lever action rifle to the range because that's never going to be what I pick up and use. So why would I want to practice with that? I practice with things that I use, not with things that I don't use. Now, if you want to do it because you have a love of tradition and that just appeals to you, hey, I talked about being a Civil War reenactor. I'll tell you what, I've watched these kendo classes where they've got the reed swords, and I think those look really cool. I think that does look like something that would be a lot of fun. I would consider doing that as a diversion. I wouldn't have any illusions about that translating to self-defense for me, but I can totally see, if it was something available in my area, I could totally see how it would be something worthwhile and enjoyable. If you're doing it for strictly that reason, hey, you get a sword with a long red ribbon on the handle and you go flying around the room with it and knock yourself out. And I'm not knocking that. If you enjoy it, you enjoy it. But that's not a requirement to learn a self-defense. And in fact, in my opinion, it's a detriment. To expound on that previous point on how that can be a detriment, any school that kind of teaches you too much, there's a thin line between being well-rounded and jumping around so much that you're just not learning enough. So it's hard to know kind of where that fine line is. But if you feel like you're jumping around so much that you're not retaining anything, and this might be something you figure out pretty far down the road, that's a pretty good sign that school's not being effective. This is another thing I'm probably going to get bad emails on, but I'm willing to open myself up. The kata. So katas. So for those of you that don't know, this is practicing forms. When you see martial artists practicing forms, usually moving in like an I formation up and down the room, doing moves one at a time. They're a drill to build muscle memory, to work on your balance, to work on proper technique. And if they're used for that, fine. Okay? They are not an indication of mastery. I don't think any martial art that promotes people based off of the kata, I don't think that should be a basis for promotion, because basically then it's, in my opinion, becomes a dance competition. I disagree with the people that say, well, they're just like shadow boxing, to a very small extent, because if you notice, katas are not, if you think of shadow boxing, the speed at which it's performed, when you're doing shadow boxing, it's also more fluid and reactionary, right? I am imagining an opponent throwing a jab, throwing a hook, and I'm reacting to that. I'm imagining an opening in my opponent, and I'm capitalizing on that with a strike. A kata is not. A kata is a memorized series of moves that you do in a set order. Nobody's ever going to flip a switch and kata their way through a street fight and win it, because the person you're fighting against has a vote in that. And if they move left instead of moving right, or do something you didn't anticipate, now your kata is out the window. This was a big weakness in what was called the line system that the Army used for a while and then completely abandoned in favor of modern Army combatives. You're going to do a set, you're going to start, and you're going to do this move, this move, this move, this move, this move. So it was essentially almost like katas, but it never worked, and that's why the Army abandoned it. Certainly they can be enjoyable. Again, if you're doing this for you want to be a martial arts traditionalist and get the enjoyment out of that way, and thinking of it like Tai Chi or yoga, hey, more power to you. And I do think there's a place for that, and I absolutely see that as something you can get enjoyment out of, physical fitness and well-being out of. But katas are not a replacement for sparring a fully resistant opponent. Okay? John Hackelman, in his Kempo system out of the pit, traditionally that Kempo system utilized katas. They don't. They've completely abandoned them, recognizing their limitations and knowing that for practicality purposes, and if you have any doubt about the practicality purposes, look at Chuck Liddell and the other fighters that have come out of that camp. And Tim has trained there as well. I mean, there's 100% practicality because they've eliminated the impractical and expounded upon what is practical and what works. And they didn't think katas worked, and who am I to argue against that? And I agree with them. In a lot of aspects, I think hitting mitts with a coach is probably a better use of your time. That's just my opinion. Another thing that I don't like, and you should avoid, any instructor who claims that their techniques, you won't see our techniques used in MMA or the octagon, because if you do our techniques, they're going to kill people. Okay, that can be said of certain things, but let's be realistic. MMA might not be a real fight, I'm making air quotes, but it's like 90% real, okay? You can't tell me that a top-level MMA fighter is going to go against their top-level guy and just get completely shut down because of eye gouges, groin strikes, or biting, okay? If those are the only three things in your toolbox, I only have three things to defend against. And that makes fighting you very, very easy for me, okay? So adding a couple of, some dirty moves in there that are outlawed in MMA and thinking that this is the key to the mystery is not the answer. A lot of these places talk specifically, a lot of moves that end in snapping a neck. Snapping a human neck, unless the person is 90 years old, is way, way harder than anybody realizes it is, okay? I've held a cadaveric neck in my head. I've seen a human neck break, okay, it's really hard to snap a neck with your bare hands. It's a lot harder than people think it is. If you get a guillotine choke on there right and move right, yeah, there's a way to do it. But if that's your only move, you got to get to that point, which means you got to fight through everything else to get there. So all these places that say, yeah, you know, our way is better because our way is real street fighting, and no, I can't spar with you because I would have to kill you. No, I can't enter an MMA fight because I would have to kill my opponent. I just think it's a bunch of bullshit. If it's not battle tested, then you don't know if it works. And that was the problem with martial arts for decades, is they weren't battle tested. They practiced in a vacuum, right? They shadow boxed each other. They sparred under very controlled circumstances. So you don't know if it works. And if you don't know if it works, you don't know if it works, okay? The things that we know work, right? We know we have law enforcement out there taking these programs. We have soldiers and Marines taking these programs and utilizing them in combat. We know that they work. And both MACP and McMAP are based on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and some stand-up techniques, and we know that they work. So these are things that are battle tested. Another thing to stay away from, Shane and I talked about it when he was on, don't buy into the CrossFit self-defense thing. I think CrossFit's a good fitness program, although some people disagree with me. The whole CrossFit self-defense thing, there's holes in it you can drive a truck through, and that's all I'm going to say about that. I would avoid anything that requires matrix level feats to master. Okay, those look really cool. Triple spinning back kicks and all that other stuff. Those are great. Okay, and if that's your bag, that's your bag. And you've started at age 11, that's your bag. But I can tell you that the things that you're going to be able to do at a level of debilitation, at a different fitness level, that you can master techniques that are more simple and do not require gravity-defying feats of daring do, those are the things that are going to stay with you longer, okay? The Anthony Pettis Showtime kick is awesome. Not everybody can do that. So I don't think, going someplace that you're doing these video game level finishing moves in order to master it, yeah, that tends to turn me off a little bit. I think, doing things that are a little bit more practical and not letting the fight get to the point that you opened up yourself for that is maybe a little bit better. Are those things awesome? And is that guy going to kick my head off every time? Absolutely. But am I ever going to be able to learn that? No. So I wouldn't go someplace that's what they're teaching. Things to look for. Look for an instructor that looks the part, all right? You should have a quiet confidence and a friendly manner. They should be welcoming. Greg Thompson, probably the epitome of this at Team Rock in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Guy that comes around, gives you a warm smile, very soft-spoken, thanks everybody for being there, and he could absolutely kill you with his bare hands if he wanted to. Great instructor. And all the great instructors are like that. John Ramsier, my black belt. By the way, John, get well soon. Not going to get into details, but he's currently on the mend. Friendly guy, great guy, great person to be around. Makes you comfortable in that learning environment. Also, another thing to look for places that train actual fighters. Okay, it doesn't have to be an MMA mill. Again, you want to avoid the stable where you're going to be a punching bag. But if it's a place that trains actual fighters, then they know their stuff's working. Okay, they're testing, they're putting it out there to be tested, and they're adjusting their training methods depending on how those things do. You're never going to go wrong finding a school that's affiliated with some type of reputable organization, whether that's Gracie Humaita, Gracie Baja, Alliance, or Alliance as some people pronounce it, American Kickboxing Academy, American Top Team, The Pit, as I mentioned, John Hackelman's academy. All these schools have affiliates nationwide. If they are affiliated, they've already been vetted. They already have somebody coming down to make sure they're doing the right thing periodically, that their instructors are trained to a certain level, because these are all very professional organizations. They don't want to put anything out there with their name on it that's going to reflect poorly on them. So you're always going to be in good shape if you pick a place that's affiliated with a larger national organization and you do some research and you see good things about them. Another thing to look at when you're picking a place: sparring, and more sparring. I said it before, I'll say it again. You have to be sparring against live opponents and at full resistance. Very important, and you're not going to know this until you go there. It should feel like work. All right, you should not walk out of class feeling like you got up and did the hokey pokey and you moved around. Okay, it should feel like work. It should feel challenging. I was a Ranger. I was a Green Beret. I'm a physician. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the most challenging fucking thing I've ever done in my life. And I like that. You should feel challenged. Every day, you should walk out of there feeling, I can just do a little bit better. I did a little bit better than last time, and I can just do a little bit better. And I'm pushing the envelope. And I don't care what you're doing. I don't care if you're doing Taekwondo, Shuri-Ryu, Kempo, whatever it is, or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You should walk out of there sweaty, feeling like you did some work, feeling like you got a little bit better, but somebody got the better of you, and you're going to do better next time. That's how you should feel. Bottom line, go someplace that gets you out of your comfort zone. It should challenge you, and you should have realistic feedback against opponents. You and your training partners are iron sharpening iron, and that's the way it should feel. As I said before, MACP and MCMAP, so the Army Combatives Program and the Marine Corps Combatives Program, strongly based in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai. I don't think you can go wrong with those things. Most law enforcement programs, likewise, are similarly based in that. The ones that work, anyway. That's about all I got, man. That's I know I'm going to get some hate emails for this, and I'm completely open to that. It is what it is. Again, all of this is my opinion, and yes, I'm Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu centric. I don't make any bones about that. But I'll put the offer forth that I put all the time. Email me at mike@sheepdogresponse.com if you want to send me hate emails on why I'm wrong about all this, or if you have a place near you that you're thinking about and you don't know if you should go. And the answer is you absolutely should. You should avail yourself of whatever is out there. Okay, if there's not a jiu-jitsu place, or if there's not an MMA place, not a well-rounded place, whatever is near you, you should take advantage of. Okay, and let's say absolute worst case scenario, you link up with some like-minded people and you start training together, maybe outside of class. This is how the whole Gracie Garage thing got started. You start watching some YouTube videos. The Stefan Kesting videos, when I was a white belt, between those and the Roy Dean instructional videos, took me a long way. And you can learn a lot from YouTube. You can learn a lot from apps as long as you're practicing against fully resistant opponents. And that's the most important thing. But you want to train in a safe environment. You want to be challenged. So just do it, man. If you're listening to this podcast, you're the type of person that knows you need to be doing it, so you need to start doing it. All you people out there worldwide, the worldwide listeners, make sure you send me an email. Let me know where you're at, how you found the podcast. I want to give a shout out to Mr. John McRae from Scotland, who emailed me last week telling me about how he found the podcast. And he's getting ready to take up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. John, thank you for listening, and thank you for emailing us. Can't tell you how much I appreciate it, knowing that there's people around the globe listening to my opinion on shit. It means a lot to me. I'm going to close today with a quote from the master himself, Helio Gracie, who said, "Jiu-Jitsu is a mousetrap. The trap does not chase the mouse, but when the mouse grabs the cheese, the trap plays its role." Remember that, everybody. And until next time, be a sheepdog.
You have been listening to The Sheepdog Project. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Sheepdog Response. The views expressed on this podcast are those of the individual and do not represent any larger entity, public or private.